So this video is to help make it a little bit easier to make your portfolio of a school district. So I am at greatschools.org and I'm going to search for a school. I'm going to enter the zip code for Glen St. Mary, so that's 32040. I could also enter McClenny, which is 32063 if I wanted. So I'm going to search, and here are some schools. There's a lot of private schools or daycare type of situations, but I'm going to look at Westside Elementary. If I wanted, of course, I could go for a school in McClenny, but I'm going to choose Westside. So I clicked on Westside Elementary School, and I can learn lots of different things about Westside, but I'm kind of interested in test scores. So I'll click on this word test scores. And I see that they are above the state average, which is great news. And I can see kind of how much above the average in English and math. So I'm curious what year this was. So I'm going to click on sources. And I can see that these are based on 2019 scores. And they say end of course test or Florida Standards Assessment. So I know that Westside is a school that has up to 3rd grade. Obviously, I can research that by looking at the Florida DOE or Westside's own website. It's at the Baker County School District website, or of course I visited there and I know that myself. So obviously this is FSA data. It's 2019. I wish it was newer, but Great Schools is what we have right now because of the changes with the Florida School District or the Florida Department of Education website. So it's okay. I'm going to use the 2019 data I can get. English, of course, is going to be what we call ELA, English Language Arts, and then there's math. So I can see from this graph that I looked a little bit deeper onto this website, and I was able to see that they use passing scores as what they count in this. So 67% of the 3rd graders at Westside, or if it was another school, the students at that school, passed the ELA test. And the state average is this little gray triangle. 55% of the students in the state of Florida, 3rd graders, passed the test. And math the same, 57% in the state, 76% at Westside. So go Westside Panthers. So I can make a chart about that if I want to. So of course I would go to my Google Sheets, or I could use Excel, and I could just make a little chart. So I'm going to look at let's do ELA, and the next line, let's do math. And up here, I'm going to put West, and I'm going to put state. And I need to go back to Great Schools to remind myself. English was 67, math was 76. So ELA was 67, math was 76. And let's check the state. The state was 55 and 57. So I'll plug that in, 55 and 57. I have some data here. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to hit insert, and I want to insert a chart. So here's my chart. I can like the chart how it is. I can be like, not the best in the world. Maybe I want to make these, let's see if I can put percent after it to make it a little bit more, see how that changes the labeling, if it changes the labeling. It may not, so I'm going to have to change things differently. It does. I like that better. That's a bar graph that compares them on ELA, but I don't have my math scores yet, so I might want to try. I was hoping to get 2 bar graphs, so I'm going to have to play with it in different ways. Let me try it one more time. There we go. So I didn't highlight something, right? Or it changed it around. So that's a chart I like better. So it shows Westside is the blue, state is the red. I kind of like the color scheme. I might want to change things around. I can click on different things, and I can change how the legend, I can change the chart style. I want to change the colors. I want to change how it's themed. I want to change which direction everything goes. I might want to make it into like a different type of graph. So I would have inserted a chart. If I use Excel, I have even more options, but I can change around different things. I can play around with this and make it pretty or whatever. But, you know, I kind of like it. I want to change this to say 2019 scores, because I felt like that wasn't as informative as it could be, so I changed that. I think I like it now. So I am going to copy that, and I'm probably going to have to get right in the corner. There we go. I'm going to copy the chart. I'm going to go to my presentation. Remember, my first page is kind of an overview, and I would do like Westside Elementary School, my name. I put in a few pictures. I'm going to have to add a few slides. I'll add a like a slide like this, and I'll do FSA overall or FSA comparison to state, and then that's where I want to insert that, and I can paste it, and I want to paste it how it is, and then I want to move it a little bit over to the middle. That's how I'll put it. Or I can break it apart and do English language arts and math as two separate ones. I can play around with it lots of different ways. Some key things I want to remember is that I'm going to have to write about comparing and analyzing. I don't just want to put this information. I want to analyze why. Why is Westside higher than the state? You've been to Westside. What do you see there that's happening that helps them be higher than the state? If you were running Westside and it was higher than the state, what would you do to make sure it stays higher than the state? I'm going to go back to Great Schools. Hopefully I can see at the state website at fldoe.org, I can look at what they've done over the years. But we're really looking at how we can pull it apart for equity. Equity is how we treat not necessarily everybody equal, but we give everybody the opportunities that they need in order to have the opportunity to get access to have their scores come out as close as possible. So sometimes that actually means giving some people extra, not necessarily equal, but what they need, which might be more than what somebody else needs. So when we look at their academics, we're going to keep coming down. There's lots of ads. They have to pay their bills somehow. So we're going to scroll down below the ads and look at this equity. The first area of equity that we're going to look at is low income. And we sometimes call that low SES, socioeconomic status. And we basically define that as the kids who do or don't qualify for free or reduced meals, free or reduced lunch and breakfast. So these kids that fall into this category of being low income, kids that do on their own, not just because the school eats for free, but because their family would qualify for them to eat for free, they often score lower than all the students who don't meet that qualification, whose families have more economic or financial or money resources. And as it turns out, at Westside, 57% of these kids that are in the low income group pass the test. 81% of the other students pass the test. And to be honest, that's pretty good compared to where we might expect in the state. And we know this because Great Schools gave them a 7 out of 10 score, which is admirable. That's a positive thing for them. So we see that overall. And then we can even break it down. And I apologize, this isn't just low income, but underserved students in different categories that might be different races, might be kids with disabilities. Overall, we see that. Now they break it down. So we're going to look at specifically different races. And at Westside, the two races that were big enough to be measured without kind of violating anybody's confidentiality or giving away how a certain student or a small group of students scored were the two groups of white students and black students. So we can see all students overall, and then we can compare white and black. We're specifically going to look at ELA and then at math. So overall, we know this. With English, 68% of their students pass the test. And of those, we have 70% of the white students pass the test, 44% of the black students pass the test. And you can see with the state, both the white students and the black students at Westside, on average, those groups beat the average performance for those groups in the state. So first of all, that's something to celebrate. Secondly, there's still a pretty big gap. So we could graph that out. We could put all of that into a Google graph, copy that graph into our PowerPoint or our Google slideshow, and then we could analyze, what do you think about that? Why do you think there's this gap? This gap happens all across the state. This gap happens nationally on average. Why do you think that's happening in general? Why do you think that's happening at Westside? What could you do if you worked at Westside to help to close that gap? Treating all these kids equally, is that going to close that gap? Or do we need to do something more to have equity to give those black kids that chance to get that gap either closed or shrink that gap to make it where the students on average in that group are coming closer to the students on average in the white group? What would be the thing that we could do, or a few things we could do at Westside to support that group? That's what you do on that next slide after you show the data. So you're going to make a chart, then you're going to analyze. You're going to put your thoughts into like the mind of an administrator at Westside who has this data and is thinking, what am I going to do? Because that's not right that this big gap exists. How am I going to support my students who are black, my teachers who are supporting my students who are black? How can I close that gap? We're going to do the same thing for math, because this data is here, and look at that. That gap's not nearly as big. What are they doing right over there that's helping to close that gap? The state has a huge gap in math, 41% to 69%. Westside does not have nearly as big a gap. That's a very small gap. Doesn't mean it's right that there's a 3% gap, but that's a tiny gap compared to the state's gap. What are they already doing right over there? What can they keep doing right? What can they do to close that little gap? What do you think is already happening over there? You've seen them teach math over there. What do you think is going well over there? What can we keep doing? What could they do that they're doing for math that could possibly cannot transfer to what they do for ELA? Now that you've worked on race, now you're going to look at low income. That's where we talked about low SES qualifying for free and reduced lunch. Click on ELA. See that the low income students are performing not as well as the students who are not low income, though the gap is not as big as it is for the state, so credit to Westside for that. How can you fill that gap? Make some charts, then think about how to fill that gap. Look at math as well. Math seems to be a strength for Westside in terms of not having that gap. Then we look at students with disabilities. Make sure you're on test scores, because this kind of defaulted to discipline and attendance. With test scores, comparing all students, they're not comparing students without disabilities. This is a little different here. They're comparing all students to students with disabilities, where 46% of their students that have a disability pass the test, 68% in ELA. Of all their students, we know that score, that's familiar to us, pass the test. The state was, wow, they have the state beat. They have more than doubled the state score, so they're doing something right. How can they keep increasing from there? And again, with math, they exactly have double. So they're doing a lot of things right at Westside, which you've observed. What are the things you've noticed? How can they keep increasing from there? So remember, you're going to make your little charts over here. You're going to make them in your Google Charts or on Excel. You're going to copy each chart into your presentation, and under each chart, you're going to have an analysis. And you'll build your presentation, and then at the end, you're going to give credit to Great Schools. You're also going to go to fldoe.org which is the state's website.